All right, so I am now honored to introduce John Tapogna, a senior policy advisor with ECONorthwest in Portland. He specializes in education, social, and fiscal policy. John holds a master's in public policy from Harvard University, a BA in journalism from the University of Oregon. And since his arrival at ECONorthwest in 1997, John has built consulting practices in education, healthcare, human services, and tax policy. The education practice is organized around the use of student-level longitudinal data to evaluate programs for clients, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Lumina Foundation, Idaho's Albertson Family Foundation, and Oregon's Chalkboard Project. John also led the design and development of award-winning software tools in 10 states that help low-income families, seniors, and people with disabilities and veterans understand their eligibility for safety net programs. Prior to joining ECONorthwest, John served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Chile and was an analyst in the U.S. Congressional Budget Office, and he worked on some of the costs of the Clinton-era welfare reforms. John is going to present to us on the talent assessment. Welcome, John.
So, you know, if the Talent Summit were a TV series, this would be the third edition, and you would start with last time at the Talent Summit. Last time at the Talent Summit in March of 2020, we summarized it by saying labor market is tight, unemployment is low, employers are struggling to hire, and especially they want to have better developed interpersonal or social skills in their employees. So in those respects, not much has changed in 2 years. We're in a similar spot. In any event, we are going to step through, needless to say, we have had a very unusual period of 2 years, and we are still moving through it. I would characterize it as perhaps one of the most unusual times in the labor market since the end of World War II, when military was coming back and re-engaging in the workforce, and those who had been working on the war effort here were going back and working from home more. So let's just take a step through this and take a look at some of the statistics. This is a chart with respect to Future Ready. If there were one chart out of this deck that I would sort of cut out and I would keep, it would be this one. This is sort of an index of employment going back to 2019 and looking at where those employment gains have been made. One would be getting back to the 2019 level by sort of these high-level industrial sectors. And so what you can see there, unsurprisingly, is this huge drop in the leisure and hospitality sector, smaller drops across the board. What the state economist is forecasting is that this year, sometime this year, we're going to get back to the 2019, to the pre-pandemic employment levels overall. But it's going to take us until 2027 for us to get back to that level of pre-pandemic employment in leisure and hospitality. So what does that mean? There is an awful lot of individuals out there who came into this pandemic working in the leisure and hospitality sector, and thousands are not going to have the opportunity to go back to that same occupation or that kind of work over the course of the next several years. So if there was ever a better time to invest $200 million to get out and try to accelerate and give that part of the workforce an opportunity to look into other sectors, this is it. So if you don't remember any other chart other than this one, this is the keeper, and I think a major justification for that $200 million investment. In terms of other things that are going on right now, we sort of have to think about a lot of disruption now that also sort of overlay longer standing issues that Dr. Bonvillian introduced earlier this morning. So first of all, it's a highly active market for labor right now, and this is just looking at job openings and job quits as we sort of came into 2020 and 2021. And for all the conversation about the Great Resignation, yes, there are quite a few quits, and if you do it as a quit rate, those are the highest that we've seen in in a couple of decades, those openings are really the piece as that leisure and hospitality and other sectors that were impacted by social distancing are trying to get going again. It's just a massive surge of a lot of employers looking for not enough people out there to join their workforce. So that's one feature of what we have going on. Another piece that's sort of been sitting in the background is that we've had this, I've characterized sort of a collision of a public health crisis with a massive federal intervention that has helped accelerate this recovery and has provided a tremendous amount of support during this pandemic. And so this is a chart, it's in income quartiles of monthly checking account balances provided by JP Morgan. And basically showing how those monthly checking account balances were stimulated by stimulus payments, also by unemployment, extended unemployment benefits by the federal government, and then most recently by those child tax credit payments that ended in December of last year. We cut the child poverty rate in about half, understood that whole dynamic, and then unfortunately have turned that off. But in any event, this has provided a tremendous amount of support to families and has given some workers the ability to be a little bit more careful in their choices of when and how to re-engage with the workforce. In addition, we still do, as employers are continuing to look for workers, we still have a number of workers who are at home taking care of kids or taking care of family, and that is a stated reason. This is a study out of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis of why they remain outside of the labor force. We are still in a pandemic, and we have unstable childcare arrangements, we have unstable school schedules, et cetera, and people are still dealing with that. And then, in addition to that, a whole other policy piece, and this is work courtesy of Josh Lerner at the state. You know, we're down about 68,000 international immigrants because we have slowed down visa processes during this pandemic. We've sort of slammed the brakes on international immigration. This is an issue nationally, and Josh did the estimates here. So we have a shortage there as well in terms of the number of people who are available for employers to go look for. So those are all sort of short-term impacts that lead to this chart, which might be the second chart that I would use if you want to cut it out and walk around with it, which is the ratio of the number of unemployed people divided by the number of vacancies. So how many openings are out there? How many unemployed people are out there? You're getting close, very close to 1. Which is an extremely tight market. You might say, well, 1, that's good, you know, then everybody has 1 job. But that would only work if those who are unemployed exactly match up with all the openings that are out there. And of course, that's not anywhere close to the case. So that will give you a feel, and one to keep an eye on as you think about what's going to happen to wages going forward. If that stays around 1, you're going to have wage inflation and more challenges on that front. Now, I do want to transition because all of these sort of very eventful near-term challenges sit over the top of longer-standing workforce dynamics and challenges that we had coming into this pandemic, including one that Dr. Bonvillian introduced this morning, which is the share of the workforce that is over age 55. And so what we have here, that was down around 10% or so if you went back to 1992, and it has now risen across all sectors to close to a quarter. You can see especially high there in the utilities sector, and it started to come down just shortly after Ann was hired at PGE. You can see the impact there, but clearly, and manufacturing sort of above that average. So again, there's an awful lot of work to do here, and it is different in different sectors. Sort of the urgency for those replacements will come harder and faster in some sectors rather than others. So we have to pay attention to that. Now, here's another one. Here is our what the economists would call prime age workers, age 25 to 54, a term that I increasingly resent, but nonetheless is used in these statistics. And here I'm comparing labor force participation rates for prime age workers. These are in the sort of the age profile that you would expect people to be active in the labor force if they could be. And I'm comparing them to the other G7, group of 7 nations, wealthy European and Japan. And you can see that we only beat Italy on these two. And issues by gender, I think if you look at on the female side, that the history of an undersupported childcare infrastructure and childcare subsidies in this country, you saw a big run up in the United States. It used to lead on female labor force participation rate, and it sort of hit a wall around the year 2000, and other countries started to pass this by. On the male side, I think Dr. Monvillian talked about our underinvestment in workforce training in this country. That is certainly a piece of it. But another piece that is very important is our mass incarceration system in this country, which it doesn't impact these numbers when individuals are in jail, but it certainly, or in prison, but it certainly impacts them when they come out, and they have a much harder time finding work with those criminal records and getting reintegrated into the labor force. So these are issues that are with us and continue to be with us that we're going to have to work through. So now we did do a talent assessment, a survey, and I'm going to call attention to these QR codes. I think there might be 40 to 50 employers here today, and these are sitting on tables around. If not, I'll hand you one, or Kari and Kendra might be able to share one with you back there. We did a survey of, let's see here, 268 employers as of March 28th, but that survey is still open, harvesting perspectives on the current situation of the workforce in 11 key industries. So if you haven't filled them out, you can take a picture with this QR code, and you can do it on your phone, and it'll close today. So take a little time if you have a moment. Among our 268 respondents as of March 28th, we had a bit of overrepresentation in the leisure and hospitality sector. They had a lot on their minds. So as you think about these responses, keep that in mind. Topics included general and internal workforce conditions, hiring challenges, community conditions, and workforce system engagement. So let's take a look at what the employers had to say. First of all, 71% of respondents believe that their existing staff were fully proficient in their jobs. So that's the benchmark, 71% saying their existing staff were fully proficient. And top reasons cited for a lack of proficiency, for those who said not all their employees were proficient, their staffs were new to their role, specific occupational skills were still missing, and then, and Greg Heyman, I apologize, we're going to call these essential and interpersonal skills was sort of next on the list, and then work experience, et cetera. This is a finding, and you'll see it again with the applicant question, because this is about their existing staff. If you look at the bottom, basic skills and education level are low on this. This was the same answer we got in 2018, where we sort of characterized a skills gap as being sort of a fundamental shortage of either high school degrees or AAs or BAs, et cetera. Employers are like, no, we're getting people coming in with the degrees that we would expect them to come in with. They need more of this at the top, more specific occupational skills and better interpersonal skills, and just more experience on the job. So now I'm going to switch from sort of commentary on their existing staff to the applicants that they're seeing, and unsurprisingly, 85% of respondents said they had difficulty finding qualified applicants in the last 12 months. No news here. We would have been shocked if we'd heard anything other than a high number there. And again, if you look at this chart, the agrees are in gray there, the big bars. The applicants have the education level required, broadly agree. Applicants have the basic skills required, broadly agree. Go to the bottom of the chart, applicants have the relevant work experience, much lower. Applicants have occupational skills required, much lower, et cetera. So the employers are saying somewhere, somehow in this, we would love to figure out a way to get more specific in terms of the kinds of skills that individuals are showing up and are starting with as we do our hiring. Then we asked, okay, beyond the skills, what are other things that are getting in your way of hiring? And look at the very top of the list. Limited housing supply and the high cost of living for employees. 75% plus they're saying either they moderately or that was a moderate or high problem, and then lack of childcare for employees coming in right behind it. So in sort of the headline of everything's connected, we have an awful lot of public policy to deal with. There's a YIMBY convention going on over at Portland State University right now. They need to be able to have success in order for the workforce problem to be solved as well. You sort of have to pay attention to all of it at once. Consequences of the hiring challenge, increased workload for other staff, lower overall productivity, reduced output or sales, and reduced product or service quality were sort of at the top of that list. But look at that one, increased workload for other staff, and then think about the answers to this one. What are your top management concerns over the course of the next 6 months? Either high or moderate agreement, employee resignations or turnover, and supporting employee mental health and well-being. The top two, unsurprising. It is just tough territory out there right now in the workforce with an awful lot of work trying to get done and the economy expanding as fast as it can, but an awful lot of stress and burden being placed on people who are the incumbent workers at the moment. Here's some good news. We did ask a variety of different ways that employers might engage in workforce development, and I would characterize this as sort of broad endorsement of the kinds of work that Future Ready Oregon wants to do. So what kinds of things would you be likely or maybe to engage in? Lots of interest in apprenticeships, partnering with educators to develop career pathways, collaborate in statewide industry consortium, help develop standards for academic credit, et cetera. So they said it. Now I think the charge of this group and others is to sort of get out there and make it happen, because it appears there is some willingness to get this done. And then we did ask a question about attempts to diversify their workforce. And I would say we got 70% of firms saying they are actively working to diversify their workforce. The way I would react to that is 30% of respondents are in trouble, given the consumer base going forward and the workforce of the future. And so if they're not working on it now, they're going to be working on it. And if they don't work on it, they're going to go out of business. So that's the employer survey. If your answers aren't in there yet, get that QR code and wrap it up by this afternoon, and we'll get your thoughts in there as well. So now I'm just going to touch on this ever so briefly, sort of this opportunity with Future Ready Oregon. I am a big fan, wrote about that in the Oregonian a week and a half ago or so. This really is a landmark investment, and we are so fortunate to have folks coming in from other states and other places to help us think about this. These are, in addition to Dr. Bonvillian's book, the Rand Corporation and Brookings put out a couple of pieces over the course of the last year and a half that are also sort of helpful in thinking about the nature of the problem. I can't outdo Dr. Bonvillian. He had a list, much longer list of critiques, but there are common themes across all of these papers. Public investment in workforce development is low relative to other advanced countries. Businesses underinvest in training and are disconnected from educators and job seekers and hire on the spot market. If you were here 4 years ago for Joe Fuller at Harvard University, that was his point, that employers are sitting back too much and they need to get in and be much more active in their collaborations. Information on skill needs is siloed and poorly conveyed across parties, and most training programs were not designed with older adults or lifelong learning in mind. Program durations are too long, and wraparound supports are inadequate. So I'm just going to touch ever so briefly on a couple of items. As I think Dr. Bonvillian's book says, there are no silver bullets in this. There are many problems and there are many remedies, and all of them need attention. But a couple that I pulled out of his appendix that I really enjoy, and one is Project Quest out of San Antonio. You're going to probably hear a little bit more about that from Mark Elliott this afternoon. They seem to have a couple of nice pieces of this in the San Antonio program, some industry consortia activity that has identified specific occupations that they're trying to fill in the trades and advanced manufacturing, healthcare, and information technology. Sounds an awful lot like the industry consortia that we're talking about in Oregon. But then also sort of funding that helps pay for some of those wraparound services so that you can start to design a package for a trainee that works for their life and reduces some of that financial burden of slowing down work and trying to get your skills up. Another one also that we've seen in Dr. Bonvillian's book and others is the Talent Pipeline Management Program from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Foundation, and I know Nikki is going to be speaking this afternoon. It just gives you a sense. Vermont's a few years into this already. This is what they're doing in the healthcare space on theirs. And I know Lindsay as well this afternoon is also well-skilled at these industry consortia, but we benefit from an awful lot of work that has come before us. And hopefully, come 2026, 2027, we can look back and say, not only did thousands of Oregonians get trained over the course of the last several years, but we left this workforce system in better condition than we found it in 2022. So with that, I am going to just do 3 takeaways. I'm going to end a little bit early here and we go to lunch. So businesses' abilities to operate while socially distancing and a robust federal response to the pandemic resulted in a record short recession and an accelerated job recovery. Together, the public health crisis and the federal policy response triggered one of the largest disruptions in the labor market since World War II. Just recognize the space that you are in right now. These are unusual times. And fortunately, we have some additional resource to deal with them. Oregon employers sent several important messages in their survey responses. First, believe everything you read in the press, at least with respect to labor market conditions. We and our employers are struggling to keep up. Issues unrelated to talent and skills exacerbate the hiring challenge, and in Oregon, especially housing, but also childcare as well. And like we said in 2018, I'm speaking in the voice of the employers, we're more concerned about specific occupational skills and interpersonal skills than we are about basic skills and education levels. Not that those aren't important, but from their perception, that job is sort of getting done, and it's that finishing work, which is probably requires more project-based learning and more engagement is what's needed from their perspective. And then finally, a slow jobs recovery for leisure and hospitality implies that some former employees will be looking for work in other sectors. Those dislocated workers, they tend to be younger and have less post-secondary experience. They are ideal candidates for the Future Ready Oregon investments. So with that, thank you to everybody who was a part of bringing this all together, and thank you.